Welcome to Mystara for a biographical video, the subject this time being Prince Eusebius, the later Emperor Eusebius, after the death of his father canonically in 1013 from old age and disease at the age of 73. Now Thyatis is a new emperor, and one that finds himself on the throne at the height of some of the worst times for the empire. So who is this guy? What's his plan for revising Thyatis' decline, and how much will it cost? I'm Mr. Welch, and the emperor is dead. Long live the emperor. Eusebius is a genius, a rarity for fighters. His intelligence score is a staggering 16, while his wisdom is only 10. Intelligence doesn't give many bonuses for the fighting types in most versions of D&D, typically only additional skills. 5th edition doesn't even give them that. But Eusebius is a perfect example of how to handle a fighter that knows his way around history books and mathematics. Now if only TSR had given them more than 4 lines of details in the almanacs. Fortunately, Joshuan finally gives us all the skinny. According to Dawn of the Emperors, Eusebius, at the time of the Gazetteers, was 36 years old, born in 261 AC. So unless time flows differently for the Crown Prince of Alphasia, that's a typo, and he was instead born in 961 AD. His youth was spent being raised and taught by valets and soldiers. He was quite popular among the legionnaires. They considered him a good luck charm and eventually one of their own. His father was too busy running the empire to spend too much time siring his son. His mother was in a perpetual malaise from being discarded as soon as she'd given Thincol a son to perform her motherly tasks. From all accounts, he was a studious child, though not a friendly one. He had the best friends that money could buy. Not that the children his age were in it for the money. They were literally being paid to pretend to be friends with the prince. When he reached 18, he was sent to the Westreach Military Academy in Corindus, where he studied as a cavalry officer. He was a good soldier, rising in the ranks to captain on merit rather than just because he would become the next emperor. He served with distinction until age 30, when he resigned his commission at his father's request to learn how to be emperor. He is married and sired 2 sons in the 6 years since that happened. He is a tactical genius from a stat block, though despite every single source saying he's a highly effective administrator and knowledgeable in finances, history, and law, he lacks any skills pertaining to the ones Dawn of the Emperors and the Poor Wizards Almanacs praise him for. The prince learned well from his father. They share a skill for manipulation, though Eusebius has nowhere near the charisma of his father. Much like the emperor, he sees people as tools rather than individuals. If you're useful to him, he rewards you. If you're a hindrance, he casts you off, if you're lucky. The only exception to this is his sister Stephania. She was the one that defied their father, the one that lived life on her terms, and the one member of his family that had no ambitions for the throne. Despite being nearly a decade apart in age, since her return, she's been his primary confidant, possibly even more than his wife Lucinia. The future Empress Lucinia is the niece of Maldinius Corindus, the Duke of Corindus. Their marriage was political. He was 7 years her senior. They seem to be a happy couple. Actually happy, not the sham marriage put on by Thincol and Gabriella. She is a bard and shares her husband's love of history and lore. She's also quite charming, as befits a bard, and she's a favorite among the populace. Eusebius allows her to engage in her musical hobbies, as she picks up all sorts of secrets while performing. She will even travel to put on shows, though never far. The restriction is more logistical than Eusebius controlling her. She's required to travel with an entire entourage of bodyguards. The further she goes, the more it costs the empire. A compromise was made to satisfy her desire to showcase her talents and her husband's frugal nature. Eusebius and Lucinia have 2 sons, only one of which causes a continuity problem. Their oldest is Coltius, born in 994 AC. He enjoys traveling, but is only rarely allowed to venture far because of the security risks. He is close to his Aunt Stephania and his Aunt Asterelia, though at the time of his birth, the latter was the official hostage in Alphasia. Depending on what book you read, he's either spiteful and resents his parents, or he's happy and go-lucky but loyal to his father while taking after his mother. Go with the version given in Joshuan's. It's far more interesting than the Poor Wizards Almanacs version. Plus, Joshuan, despite all of its faults, gives you 3 full paragraphs on the future emperor rather than just 6 lines. Coltius has decided to become a bard like his mother. He's even more charismatic than her and almost as intelligent as his father. And his wisdom score ain't half bad either. He would make for a fantastic emperor and the first good-aligned one in at least a century. His brother Gabronius was born in 999 AC, so there's not much of a history on him due to his young age. When the Mystara timeline ends, he's just becoming a teenager. Gabronius is shy and withdrawn, overwhelmed by the political game that is Thyatis. He's a bit clumsy with a stutter when frightened, but his parents are trying to coax him into becoming more relaxed. He has no adventuring class yet, and since his stats are never given, we don't know which way he'll go. Eusebius was soaking up all the lessons from his father that he could, and he was patiently waiting to be emperor. Well, not that patiently. Thincol was chugging potions of longevity like they were sugarcane Dr. Pepper. The one in the green bottles, the one that was originally bottled only in Dublin. Yeah, that's the stuff. Oh, that's Dublin, Texas, not Dublin, Ireland. But if you are Irish, try and get your hands on this liquid ambrosia. You'll thank me later. Seriously, Dr. Pepper, you've got the choice of pure imperial sugar and corn syrup, and you give us the one that's made out of corn syrup. Go back to the original recipe, the better recipe. Where was I? Oh yeah, Eusebius. The crown prince is waiting for his father to die so he can get the throne, just not too long. His original plan was to retire his father around 1010 AC when Eusebius was in his mid-40s. Wasn't going to kill his father was useful, and Eusebius is a bit of a family man. Thincol cared for his children in his own detached and frigid way. High charisma will score points with your kids even if you can't remember their birthdays. His original plan was to send his father to live out his days in the Duchy of Mystara, the luxury resort island of Thiatis. Then Eusebius would thank his father and encourage him to go on that quest for immortality he'd been putting off all these years. And not to worry, his son could handle the running of the empire just fine. Eusebius had learned from the best. But then Wrath of the Immortals happened. Thiatis fought a long and bloody stalemate with Alphatia, and despite technically winning the war due to the destruction of Alphatia, it was absolutely devastated. It didn't help that Thothia unleashed mummy rot all over the empire and destroyed their grain harvest. His father was cursed by Vanya for making peace with Alphatia, despite the fact that it was her prodding that got him to start the ill-advised war that Thiatis could not realistically win if Alphatia was on top of its game for once. In 1011, Thincol had a severe stroke and was bedridden, incapable of speaking clearly. Eusebius became the prince regent and assumed control of the empire. Thincol would survive another 5 months before dying of old age. The stroke and his recent illness didn't help. During this time, Eusebius had become appalled at the poor state of Thiatis and began emergency austerity measures. He won many people over when he cut his coronation celebration from a month to a day. Providing the crowds with free bread also helped. He began to reduce the bloated government to a more manageable size and remove corrupt bureaucrats, often lethally. He quickly made a name for himself for being ruthlessly pragmatic. The new emperor first sent his sister on a diplomatic tour to try and secure food for the starving Thyacians. The Thothian curse and sabotage had killed over 100,000 Thyacians through disease or starvation. A tenth of the empire was now dead. While Eusebius loathed to deplete the empire's already spent coffers further, he didn't want to rule over a nation of corpses. He raised much of the gold to acquire the grain and hire the clerics to end the plague by removing many of his family's rivals on trumped-up charges and seizing their wealth in the process. And some of those charges weren't that trumped up. Feeding and curing the populace would secure their loyalty. Paying for it with the wealth of his enemies was just the cherry on top. Eusebius immediately ceased all conflicts Thiatis was currently involved in. His sister hammered out a peace treaty with Thothia to end the war with the pharaoh. He increased colonization of the Isle of Dawn. With Alphatia gone, no one could stop him. His importation of grains and the heavy use of clerics to remove the spread of the mummy rot ended the plague and even ensures the nation has a food surplus for the winter. This act endears him to the citizens of Thiatis. His crackdown on corrupt officials using the purge of Eusebius' enemies to increase their wealth also doesn't go unnoticed. He ends the practice when he sees how far the abuse has spread and begins an investigation into the officials responsible. Eusebius' most significant strength is his judgment of character. He can tell who is best for a job and will bring them into his sphere of influence, even if he doesn't need their service for some time. This is what happened when he assumed the throne. The people he had set in place to join the government when he was crowned were some of the most capable nobles, bureaucrats, and soldiers Thiatis had to offer. When he set his government in place, his enemies were caught off guard on how competent the new emperor and his government were. He is terrifyingly intelligent, knows his weaknesses, and knows how to compensate for them. His relationship with his sister is more than just a sibling bond. He recognizes her talents and his need for them. She is charismatic, whereas he is droll. She is far less rash when angry than he is. But he learned from the tutors and scholars growing up, and she was more interested in living life to its fullest than picking up book knowledge. The emperor is a private man. He does not like public speaking. His speeches to the Senate will be read from a scroll matter of fact, rather than resembling any heroic diatribe. He relies on accomplishments rather than propaganda and charity to win the crowd over. He knows the average citizen will be more content if there is bread at the local store than another month of games in the Colosseum. He is frugal, but he's not risk-averse. His first task was stabilizing the empire after the disastrous war and the equally damaging plague. Now that he's accomplished that, he's looking to expand the empire and increase its wealth. His success has made him incredibly popular in Thiatis, though he rarely addresses the crowd, leaving that to his heralds, his sister, and his wife. He's happy sitting in the imperial palace, reviewing taxation reports and expense accounts. The players will not meet Eusebius until they're at least 9th level. He will hear about them and track their progress if they prove themselves capable adventurers. When he gains the throne, you can bet the characters will hear from him and be drafted into his plans. If they succeed in their missions, they will have the full support of the Thyacian government. If they screw up, they will find themselves out of work and out of favor. they really screw up, I hope they know how to fight with a net and trident. Thus ends the story of Emperor Eusebius. There was very little information on him until literally the last book with Joshua's Almanac. Then it was all of the information on him. He's a little known but major character that needed some love. Next week it's time to look at the creatures we can chalk up to the Nithians. They love tampering with nature, so what creatures can we pin on them? Until next week, this video was not sponsored by Dr. Pepper, but it would be awesome if it were. Send me an email, guys. We'll work something out, preferably with sugarcane.